that's a team, ladies and gentlemen. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, guests that have joined us for the lunch, members of the media, welcome here. 10 days from now will mark, unbelievably for me, my 7th anniversary of having the honor of leading this great party. On the occasion of my first address to the very first annual convention I spoke to in this capacity, I pledged that I would always take this opportunity, no matter where we were in the election cycle, no matter how long I had the good fortune of having this job, to ask for something, and that's your vote. There'll be a leadership vote today, as there is and should be at every convention, and I take none of that for granted. I'll never take your support or the kindness that you have shown to my family and to me for granted, and so I respectfully ask for that consideration here in just a few minutes. I find myself another year in this job very, very grateful and humbled by the many opportunities that I have had granted to me by you, by the people of this province, and by my caucus colleagues, who are truly just a great group of women and men. This year I've had a chance to fly in training fighter jets, do a barrel roll in one of those and live. I've had an audience, as you know, recently with Her Majesty at Buckingham, been able to represent the government at a number of Grey Cups. Then there was the whole potash thing that afforded some opportunities to take our message across the country and around the world. And those are very, very humbling opportunities for me, each and every one of them. And I'm mindful every day why I have those, why we who serve you as your elected government have these opportunities. And as always, I try to come to convention with some stories so you know that we're not losing our grounding, that we have lots of sources of perspective, and that continues in my life. At home, for example, in December, while some of the media were picking their newsmaker of the year, at home I was welcomed at Christmas as the noisemaker of the year by friends and family. During our mission to China last spring with the other 2 Western provinces, there was another moment of perspective. Our car pulled up for a meeting at the headquarters of the China National Petroleum Corporation, the 5th largest energy company on the planet. And I got out of the car and walked towards the main entry of this great office building in Beijing, and there were 2 members of the Army of the People's Republic of China on either side of the door in full dress uniform, and I'm not sure why they were there until I got a little closer and they snapped off a crisp salute. Then we walked into the beautiful lobby of this new building and looked around, as the vice president of the company bid us to do, looked up at the wall, and there was this giant electronic sign about 10 feet wide by, 30 feet long, and it said, "Welcome, Honorable Wall Premier of Saskatchewan." And then he directed my attention to the other side of the lobby, and there was a similar sign. He said it was the same greeting in Mandarin, though none of us knew for sure. And I was pretty pumped about that, to tell you the truth. So later that day, when we phoned home for a briefing, Reg Downs, who many of you will know, was on the other end of the phone, and we were still in session. And so I told Reg about this. I said, "Reg, we went to meet the China National Petroleum Corporation today, signed an MOU, but before I got in there, I got saluted by 2 soldiers, and my name was on this giant sign." And Reg says, "Well, that's interesting, because there was a protest at the legislature today, and here too, your name was on some signs, and more than a few of them were also saluting." And then last week at an announcement with BHP, when they unveiled support for a brand new football camp for young First Nations people who are interested, boys and girls that are interested in that sport, there we were. And in fact, on the video you saw a clip of what happened. I'm glad they chose that one because I wasn't completing a lot of passes, but that one worked out okay. And that same young fellow that caught that pass, about an hour, maybe not an hour, about 40 minutes later, when I was telling them that, I mean, I didn't know if I had many more drives left because I really had to get to work, said to me, "Isn't this part of your job?" And I said, "You know, it is, I guess. I guess it is part of my job." And then he said, "That's a pretty good job." And he's right. So I have to thank all of you for the chance to do this job, and nobody more than my wife, Tammy, who's here. Thank you. Thanks, hon. And we have three great kids who are very supportive, Megan, Coulter, and Faith. Faith is representing all three today. Faith, why don't you stand up and give us a wave? And my mom and dad, John and Alice Wall, are here as well, and I quite literally wouldn't be here without them. So, ladies and gentlemen, a few years ago, a well-known journalist, former journalist in the province, now diplomat, named Dale Eisler, wrote a book. Here's an excerpt. He wrote, "Saskatchewan is more than a province. It's a state of mind. For people who live there and those of us who've left, Saskatchewan is about something that reaches deeply into our identity. The starting premise is rooted in the powerful notion Saskatchewan people share, the belief that there is something unique about their province, that to be from there is special. But with the hindsight of history," he goes on to write, "it is evident that through its first 100 years, Saskatchewan has never equaled its promise." He says, "Undeniably, Saskatchewan is haunted by a sense of unfulfillment. The province and its people are constantly striving for something greater, some rightful destiny that will allow Saskatchewan," remember these words that he wrote, "that will allow Saskatchewan to take its place among the great provinces of the nation." He wrote, "This belief in a greater future is at the core of the Saskatchewan identity." Mr. Eisler wrote his book in 2006, and here's the only problem with it. He didn't believe it. The thesis of his book was that all of this was a, quote, myth. He called his book False Expectations. He went on to write, "As Saskatchewan enters its second century, the province's future remains arguably more uncertain and perhaps less hopeful than ever." Now, in fairness to Mr. Eisler, who is a very good journalist and now a very able diplomat, I think at the consulate office in Denver, and to be fair to him, he wasn't the only person in this province who felt that way. He, in fact, could have been taking his cue from leadership at the time in the province of Saskatchewan. The NDP leadership for decades felt that way, my friends, and said so. The leadership of our opponents said that Saskatchewan ought not to aspire to permanent have-province status. They said that we would always be, quote, in and out of equalization. Then there was the NDP Economic Development Minister, whose initials are Eldon Laudermilk. And you remember what Eldon said at the time of some particularly stark out-migration statistics being published in the province? People were leaving. Mr. Laudermilk said, "Yeah, but when people leave, there's the same amount of GDP, and so there's more sort of left for everyone to share. When people leave, there's more left for the rest of us." That's what he said. And then there was an NDP MLA who was quoted in a weekly paper in Greg Burkich's writing, and Greg, by the way, brought that paper to our attention. I should say this about Greg. He is perhaps one of the understated members of our team, but, you know, just very, very politically astute and a very focused and capable MLA that makes discussion in caucus better and our team better. And Greg, I just want to thank you for that. But Greg brings in this article wherein the NDP MLA says that it is statistically impossible for the province's population to grow at the national average. You might be thinking now, man, I've heard you say all of that before, Brad. Are you going to keep repeating that? The answer is yes, I am. We need to remember the vision of our opponents, what it is they believe about the province of Saskatchewan. because your actions will always follow your vision, no matter the vocation, no matter the avocation that you pursue. Theirs is a vision. Theirs was certainly a vision. We'll test this now into the current day. But at the time, theirs was a vision that this was not a bad place to live, pretty obviously a good place to live, but had a mediocre future and did not belong, to use Eisler's words, among the pantheon of the great provinces of the nation. That's seemingly what they believed. Here's an important consideration for this convention. We do not, nor have we ever believed that about the province of Saskatchewan. More importantly, the people of Saskatchewan have never believed that about the province of Saskatchewan. And so for the last number of years, about the time that Eisler published his book, since then, they have been seeking to prove the doubters wrong, have the people, on the strength of great resources and hopefully with the help of a government that had a growth agenda. They have sought to prove these doubters wrong about the prospects for this place that we love. And last week, the Conference Board of Canada said this, quote, Saskatchewan is set to enter a period of prolonged economic prosperity, anchored by large-scale development of the potash industry and steady gains in the energy sector. It goes on to say these factors will lift Saskatchewan's economy into first place among the provinces, with real GDP growth of 3.9% in 2011, 4.5% in 2012. Mr. Eisler was right. Saskatchewan is not just among the great provinces of the nation. Your Saskatchewan is leading the provinces of the nation. The NDP are right. Saskatchewan's population is not growing at the national average. It is growing at 1.5 times the national average, the fastest pace of growth in the Dominion of Canada. So you might be asking, well, given all of that, maybe the NDP have changed their way of thinking. We're in an election year, so we need to focus a little bit on what our opponents might think and do. You may be hoping for them or praying for them or cheering that they will kind of catch what's going around this province in terms of attitude and vision about the outlook for Saskatchewan, but if you are cheering for them, as I have been, you're going to be disappointed in the following. Their vision doesn't seem to have changed much. Remember in 2009, in the midst of the worldwide recession, we were doing pretty well, actually, comparatively strong. In fact, in August of that worldwide recession, we set our employment record for the province of Saskatchewan. But there were challenges. We weren't immune. We were comparatively strong, though I think on the strength of some debt we'd paid down and fiscal probity and lower income and property taxes and infrastructure investments. But even in the midst of that, we saw what our opponents truly think about the province. I remember some debate in the fall of 2009 in the legislature and remarks by the leader of our opponents. I don't think he could have scrambled off the New Saskatchewan's bandwagon any quicker. I'm sure he injured himself jumping off the New Saskatchewan bandwagon. He might have even re-aggravated that shoulder injury he got playing football against Roger Aldag when he was 4 years older than Roger Aldag. So when he was in grade 12, he would have been playing when he was in grade 8. No, it's probably true. It's probably true. At the time, though, he said our economy wasn't just facing some challenge. He said our economy is in free fall. He said our economy was in bust. They bought billboards to advertise it. They put radio ads on the air to advertise it. First, to point out that these challenges maybe were not short-term, but long-term, and more in line with their view of the longer-term prospects of this province. And then there was some more evidence just a few weeks ago of what they truly might think. Pat Atkinson, on the occasion of her retirement from politics, and let me just say, before I move on, that we wish Pat well. We truly do. Pat was a very effective constituency person, an effective MLA in the legislature, but I couldn't possibly disagree more with her perspectives on the prospects for this province that we all love. Here's what she said, quote, "What will be interesting is when Premier Wall meets adversity. It's my view that he's never really been challenged with any kind of adversity. How will he respond when things tank? And they inevitably do." Close the quote. Doesn't that tell you a little bit about the thinking of our opponents? They do not believe necessarily that the province is destined to lead. If you believe that tanking, not a temporary downturn in the cycle, but tanking is inevitable, isn't that how you will act in government, should you ever be given that chance? Our government has and will face adversity. But here's the difference. The Saskatchewan Party sees adversity to the province as a challenge on the road to something better. When our opponents seem to see adversity or tanking as an inevitable destination for the province, here again, we have some people on our side, the people of the province of Saskatchewan, who understand that we can meet these challenges and continue down towards a destination of leadership. If you believe, by the way, that tanking is inevitable, it might affect how you plan in terms of a government. Maybe we saw a little bit about it. Maybe that's why there wasn't the investment in schools that were needed. We inherited a massive structural deficit in our education system. If you believe that, you don't fix the highways. You don't have a 5-year plan. You don't invest in young people. You close hospitals. You write off rural Saskatchewan, where the outmigration was most difficult at the time. If yours is a vision of mediocrity for this province, you might even quit your team when they need you most, pack your car, and move to Calgary. I think you know who I'm talking about. Henry Burris. Why were you thinking of someone else? There may be some other people who felt like that. But ladies and gentlemen, not because of the government, but because of the people that are in this room and people you represent all across the province, things have changed. They were not false expectations after all. This is not the same Saskatchewan that Mr. Lingenfelter saw in his rearview mirror when he was driving away 10 years ago. This is a new Saskatchewan. It is vibrant, it is growing, it is optimistic, it is a place whose time has finally come. It is stronger and prouder and better. So the question we will have for voters in just a few months is this: do you like the new Saskatchewan? Do you like the direction that the province is headed in? Or do you want to go back to some other vision of the province, to the old Saskatchewan? Back to high taxes, or forward, the biggest income tax and property tax cuts in the history of the province? Back to being a have-not province with our hand out, or a have province with our head held high? Back to managing decline, or forward with planning for growth? Back to a failing health system confined by ideology, or forward with practical solutions that are recruiting frontline professionals and is reducing surgical wait times in the province of Saskatchewan? Back to ignoring vulnerable people like adults with intellectual disabilities, or forward by eliminating a wait list they have for a place to live, for the dignity of a home? Back to when young people were coming home from Calgary to visit, or forward when young people are coming home to live? Back to when the best we could hope for was somewhere back in the middle of the pack, or forward where we are leading the pack? Back to a government that too often made us a punchline, or forward making positive international headlines? Back to Kevin Yates, or forward with Gene Makowski?